Hello friends, this is your friend Professor Iqbal here, and once again I welcome all of you to my YouTube channel, My Grammar Classes, a channel which is designed for NET aspirants. Now in this episode of lecture, we are going to particularly discuss Aristotle's theory and conception of tragedy. Aristotle's theory and conception of tragedy. Now we are going to discuss 5 important points as far as NET examination is concerned. The first one, the base of Greek tragedy. The second point, which is very important, is the origin of Greek tragedy. Third one is definition of tragedy. Fourth point is function of tragedy, and the fifth point is plot of tragedy. So these essential points we are going to discuss in this episode. Now let us begin our first point, base of Greek tragedy. Now when it comes to Aristotle, he was hardly familiar with the modern drama, so his ideas are completely based on Greek drama, the drama which he was familiar with, the drama which he knew or he was familiar with. And much of the part of the poetic is devoted to the tragedy. If you see, he also discusses two different types of plots in his chapter number 13 in poetics. Chapter number 13 in poetics. And earlier, the dramas, they were presented during the Dionysius festival, and this became the base of Greek tragedy or drama. Now let us go to the second point, which is very essential for us to know, the origin of Greek drama. After having discussed the base of Greek drama, now we came to the second point, which is the origin of tragedy. Now, the poetry is divided into two forms. There are two kinds. The first one is called as iams and the second one is called as hymns on God. Now, out of the first, satiric poetry is formed, and out of the second, that is, out of hymns, heroic poetry is developed. And now, out of heroic poetry, tragedy is formed, and out of satiric poetry, comedy is formed. Tragedy, as it is limited, it has much scope and it is superior to epic, because epic does not have music. So in all aspects, tragedy is superior to all other forms according to Aristotle. Now when it comes to the third point, which is the definition of tragedy, tragedy defined. After having gone through 2 points, base and the origin of Greek tragedy, what does he do? He comes to the conclusion at the nature of tragedy. According to Aristotle, the tragedy is nothing but imitation of an action, a serious complete of certain magnitude, and it is beautified with embellishment, presents the scenes of pity and fear, and thus develops the idea of catharsis. It is based on action, not on narration. So this is what he has to tell about the definition of tragedy. It should have a certain magnitude. Now when it comes to the next point, the fourth point, the plot of tragedy. As we know, tragedy imitates action. The plot of tragedy should be logical and inevitable of events. Logical and inevitable of events, and it should have a certain magnitude. When we say it should have a certain magnitude, in the sense, it should have a beginning, it should have a middle, it should have an end. It should not be too short, as it will not be well developed, and it should not be too long. It should not be too long because it should not be complicated. So there should be a certain magnitude into it. It should be well developed. There should be enough time for the tragedy to get developed. But it should not be too long also. Now when it comes to this, when he comes to the particular idea of the tragedy, he says there are two types of plots. The first plot is called as simple plot. The second plot, what he calls, is a complex plot. When the change in the fortune occurs without discovery, it is called as a simple plot. When change in the fortune of protagonist occurs without any discovery, this is called as a simple plot. When change in the fortune of the protagonist occurs with discovery, this is called as a complex plot. This is called as a complex plot according to Aristotle. Okay, so much of the part is devoted to the tragedy, and hence tragedy plays very important role in the poetics. Now let us go to the next important point, the fifth point, which is function of tragedy. So after having discussed all the 4 points, he comes to a conclusion that the function of tragedy is to arouse the feelings of pity and fear, and thus produces catharsis. Okay, and these feelings, there should be equal proportion of these emotions in order to produce the feelings of pity and fear. Okay, they produce the scenes of pity and fear, and thus it gives mental satisfaction. This is what he says: the main function of tragedy is to arouse the feelings of pity and fear, and thus provide them joy and happiness, and give them a complete relief from their mental stability. So guys, this is something just I wanted to tell you about Aristotle's theory and concept of tragedy. That is conception of tragedy. This episode will be divided into two parts. The first part we will be discussing all the 5 points, and in our second part we are going to discuss next 4 points. So stay tuned and watch my second part of Aristotle's theory and conception of tragedy. Thank you very much everyone for watching this video. I hope if you like this video, you will definitely share, comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is particularly designed for NET set aspirants with an intention of guide them properly. Thank you very much everyone. Have a good day ahead.